This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Pallid, and I like to call Bridget. Today we're taking a look at a story sent to us by one of my patrons, Bridget. The story is entitled Bubbling. Let's get right into it without further ado. She had a headache, not entirely unusual. She always had a headache lately. He assured her that it wasn't unusual, so she didn't question it. Why would she? He was usually right in the end. Besides, it hurt less when she didn't think too much. He came home from work. She greeted him with a smile as she always did. "You look tense, darling. Would you like a massage?" "I don't have time, dear." He waved a dismissive hand. So thus far we're looking at a home life where someone must be suffering from rather constant migraines or something along those lines. We're seeing, reading ahead, we're seeing that there is a lot of she's and he's popping up. And I wonder if that's a stylistic choice or whether it would be better to give names to this man and woman who I'm assuming are in some kind of relationship. Let's press on. Her shoulders dropped. Well, is there at least something I can do for you? After all, he did so many nice things for her, and gave her so many nice things. Her necklace, she just couldn't bring herself to take off. He ran a hand through her hair, tugging at the ends. He was thinking. He always did that when he was thinking. She liked it when he did that. It meant she didn't have to. No, not right now. He leaned in and kissed her on the forehead. "You're a good girl for asking, though." Starting to feel like this lady is a talking dog, and maybe that's what they're going for, is that this is supposed to be someone who's extremely subservient to her male partner or whatever the situation might be, in the same way that a dog would be. That the dog doesn't have to think, and that the master can think for the dog, and all of these kinds of things. A necklace that you can't take off. Is this a dog? Placing my money on that this is a dog. Her chest swelled with a certain happy feeling. She loved it when he called her a good girl. He walked off to his office. She turned on her heel and went towards the kitchen. He would be so hungry soon. He would be hungry soon. He always was. She tied on her pink apron. Maybe she'd roast the ham tonight. He liked ham, didn't he? She fixed her hair up into a ponytail so it didn't get in the way of her cooking. A happy hum bubbled up from somewhere inside her as she pulled out everything she'd need to cook her darling a good meal. It was a wife's duty, after all. So there we get it, finally confirming that this is a wife. I still stipulate that this could be some kind of furry dog wife, but let's press on. She decided to make a stew rather than a roast. It would be quicker and healthier. She pulled out a white cutting board and retrieved the ingredients. After setting up the mise en place, this is some word I am not familiar with, a term I'm not familiar with. Her darling taught her that word. He said that she was more beautiful when she sounded like she knew what she was doing. She set a pot of water to boil. Googling it, mise en place is a French culinary phrase which means putting in place, as in to set up. She added just a pinch of salt to the water. That was another thing her darling taught her. He taught her all the important things she needed to know in life. Thus far I'm feeling a little bit of a forced perspective of, it's hard to describe this. There's very little that we know about this world so far. We're getting a little keyhole into this world, and what we know so far is just that there's a man, he goes out and works, and then there's a wife, and she stays home and does stay-at-home things, and she's having headaches. So putting all of this together, we don't know a time frame. We don't really know a place. We don't know those kinds of questions. We don't have those kinds of answers to the questions that I'm asking. And I'm wondering if that's trying to drive at something. I feel that there's this undercurrent to this story of her being subservient, so I'm thinking a more traditional household, I'm thinking, like 1920s America, man goes out, does work, comes home to wife cooks, doesn't think, is just subservient housewife. I don't know what it's trying to hide from me, but I feel like the story's trying to hide something from me. And we're going to see if that's its intention or not by the end, I'm sure. But if it's not the intention of the story to hide something like that, to hide some ulterior motive that's going to be a twist, then I would consider putting in more details. Anyway, she moved back to the cutting board and began cutting the various vegetables. She hummed louder the more she cut, and after a while she glanced to the pot. It was bubbling. Oh shit, there's the title. A bubble would rise to the surface, and then pop. The bubble would rise to the surface, and then pop. Over and over, over and over. Ah, she cried as a sharp pain rose through her finger. She looked down. She accidentally cut her finger. She brought it up to her lip and gently sucked. She looked down and she had accidentally cut her finger right after saying, she let out a sharp pain. She let out a cry as a sharp pain rose in her finger. I wouldn't, in both sentences in her finger, I would say find a different way to do that because it kind of sounds repetitive when you're reading it. The sharp metallic taste of blood along with the pain made her headache clear. Made that headache clear, oddly enough. Catherine blinked. What was she doing? She didn't know how to cook. Catherine stepped away from the kitchen counter and almost snapped her fucking ankle as she misstepped in her stiletto heel. She fell to the floor and groaned. What the? She raised her head. She was wearing a white and red polka dot dress that looked like it was straight from the 1950s. What the fuck? She didn't even like dresses. What was going on? See? This motherfucker called it. This motherfucker right here, with 2 thumbs and 2 index fingers, called it. There's a forced perspective going on here. And she's waking up, apparently, I think is what's going on. Let's press on, because we don't have a whole lot of information here. But we know that we're not in the 1950s, because the dress is like it was from the 1950s. Okay. Catherine sat up and pressed her heel against her palm to her forehead. Press the heel. God damn it. Press the heel of her palm to her forehead. What? Where was she? She lived in an apartment that was barely the size of this kitchen. Whose house was she at? Why couldn't she remember? Going back there for a second, because there's something I wanted to talk about and glossed over. Catherine stepped away from the kitchen counter and almost snapped her fucking ankle as she misstepped in her stiletto heel. This is where the story takes a turn, and up until this point, it had very mundane household things going on. There was this undercurrent of, it's really odd how subservient this lady is, but now we're not getting she and her, we're getting Catherine, and we're getting fucking ankle and snapping, and there's a lot of action going on in this sentence, and it serves as a good way of turning the story. You know what I mean? Okay. Why couldn't she remember? Dear? A male voice startled her. What's going on? What's wrong? She nearly jumped out of her skin. Who? Catherine scrambled up, struggling to get a balance in these fucking heels. He frowned. I'm your darling. He reached out and pointed to her left hand, raising his own. We've been married for 3 months now. He had a gold wedding band on his ring finger, and she looked down at her own, and she had a matching one. I don't remember. He had to be lying, right? How could she forget her own wedding? Oh, she looked up at him. He wasn't frowning. She couldn't place the look he had now. You snapped then. He tilted his head. Snapped? What the hell does that mean? He nodded, closing his eyes. Damn. Well, that's okay. He dug into his pocket. Don't worry, Kathy. Catty? Catty. We'll have you fixed right up. She squinted. Fixed? What does that mean? How do you know my nickname? So this is beginning to feel very surreal, and it's not something I always feel comfortable critiquing, because I'm not always sure how to critique something like this. I have a very narrow ability to critique stories. So bearing that in mind, I'm not sure how to feel about this so far, and I'm not sure which direction it's going. I'm also doing a play-by-play, and maybe things I'll probably have a clearer opinion once I've read all of this. But where my mind is going right now is really wondering how she got into the situation, and I wonder if that question will even be answered. But let's press on and see what information we get. He pulled out a small remote and pushed a button. A jolt of electricity sent her nerves wild, fraying them instantly. Her hands flew to her throat as she clawed as the offending device, which I think should be at the offending device. A caller? What the fuck is going on? Catherine snapped at him. Another jolt of electricity already sent her already frayed nerves haywire. Her legs collapsed under her, leaving her in a heap on the floor. He slowly walked over to her, that stupid remote still in his hand. That's a good girl. She blinked as an infuriating mixture of rage and happiness bubbled up from deep within her. Don't worry, just listen. The man knelt down and pet her head. Just listen to the sound of my voice. So what I'm getting is that this shot caller also has the ability to brainwash people somehow. I'm not sure how that effect is being imparted, but maybe we'll see, because we're getting the mixture of rage and happiness together. Okay. Fuck you, she shouted, and tried to bite at his hand. But she, again there with the dog thing, but she was only met with another shock. Now, he tutted. Let's not do that again. Just listen. He placed his hand on her head. Just listen. She couldn't do much else at this point. You're going to drop, he said, softly, gently running his free hand through her hair. You always drop for me. She glared up at him. He smiled down at her. So that's an interesting phrasing right there. You always drop for me. So apparently that's what it means when this other personality is put to bed and this alternate subservient personality comes out, is you always drop. So dropping is that. Okay. Oh, you don't think we're going to, you don't think you're going to, but you are. Just take a deep breath in, blink twice, and breathe out. She found herself following his commands. Now, I'm going to count from 10 to 1. He continued running his hand through her hair. 10, 9, breathe in and out. 8, 7. With each breath, you feel you feel it in you. 6, 5. Just each exhale, you feel yourself empty. 4, 3. Dropping with each breath. 2. That's it. Just like that. 1. Deep, deep under. She took in a few breaths and blinked twice. So there's some combination of the shot caller and this person's ability to do hypnosis, I believe, that is putting this person into this alternate personality. Okay. She took in... Okay. Come now, dear. He took her hands. Are you okay? She slowly got to her feet. She had a headache. She didn't even remember falling. Sorry, darling, I must have slipped. He smiled. Don't worry, just go back to cooking. Like a good girl. He kissed her forehead. She smiled, feeling happy. Of course, darling. She turned on her heel. Injury forgotten. Her own name forgotten. All that mattered to her now was the stew, and the happy hum bubbling from within her. So to enjoy a story about vampires, you have to accept that vampires exist in the world that the vampires are taking place in, right? And to enjoy this story, you have to accept that such a shot caller / hypnotist combination could put someone into a trance like that. And that's something that I've always had trouble accepting, are those kinds of aspects to stories. That doesn't mean that that's a bad thing in terms of writing. It's just not something that I personally am able to usually get into. So bear that in mind as I criticize it. But outside of that, I think that the mirroring in the story at the beginning very much so mirroring the ending of the story, what the bubbling is symbolizing, the symbolism of the stew, which matches the bubbling up inside Catherine, this humming that is a different personality that's being repressed, that kind of stuff. The turning in the story where she falls on the heel, there's a lot of showing in that part because the author never outright says she's never worn heels before. It's just implied that she hasn't because she's so shitty at wearing them and she doesn't own any dresses, etc., etc. I really like those aspects of the story. So those are my feelings on this story. Let Bridget know what you think about this story in the comments. This is the second story I've read by Bridget. The other story, I think Bridget just goes by Bridge. This is the second story I've read by Bridge. The other one was a private reading because I do those too, but I don't know that it didn't feel right to share that one, but I really wish I would have done that one to begin with public because it was a very interesting read. Maybe you can pester Bridge to let you read that one as well. I'm not sure if it's finished yet. But anyway, let's wrap this up. Today's sponsor was MTV. MTV, money for nothing and chicks for free.